Welcome to the Fictitious Dark Podcast, where we explore the line between truth and the fictitious. I'm your host, Brandon Hartsock, and these are my co-hosts, Josiah Miller and Rick Castro. Today we'll be talking about two found footage films, both Bigfoot found footage films, yet both opposite side of that spectrum, opposite side of the coin. One is very slow, methodical horror, and then the other being very just go for it, kind of action-y, still a horror movie, but just way more energetic.
Yeah, one's like a suspense film, one's a slasher film, really.
Yes, that is a good analogy. Like, you're talking just a slow, methodical versus like Jason Voorhees, pretty much, Bigfoot. So that's kind of the differences of the movies. So leading up to this, I had both of you watch both these movies. Which one did you watch first? And then what'd you guys think of them?
I decided I didn't check the year they came out. I'm kind of glad I didn't. I watched Exists, which was 2014 first, and then I followed that up with Willow Creek, which was 2013, I believe.
Yep. Perfect. And Rick?
I watched Willow Creek, and then I followed it up with Exists.
And have you guys watched either of these movies like prior to this at all?
I watched Willow Creek a few years back prior, and Exist was the first time watch.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I know. I've always known about Willow Creek forever, and it's always been on my list, and then I just never checked it out until recently. And then with like kind of getting ramped up with a lot of what we're doing here, I was just kind of in the mood for that kind of stuff. I had seen a trailer for Exists like maybe nearly a year ago, and I was just like, that looks so bad. Like, just like the trailer was cheesy. They put a lot of the big hype moments in the trailer. So if you ever watch it, I just recommend not watching the trailer, even though we are definitely going to get into spoilers here. So if you have interest in these movies, just go watch them. But the trailer for Exist just showed like almost every big moment where like Bigfoot does something crazy. Was just all over all the trailers. So I thought it looked like a crappy movie. And then eventually I was like, well, I mean, it is the Blair Witch guy. Let me check it out. And I was pleasantly surprised that it's got cheese, but it's not a steaming pile of garbage.
See, I hadn't seen either, but for sure when I was looking into the filmography of Eduardo Sanchez, who had worked on Blair Witch, I was like, has this guy done anything else following this? Because the mystique around that movie is pretty legendary, and I was like, oh, Exists, and I opened the Wikipedia page and saw the poster, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I may have watched the trailer at some point back then, but that was years and years ago. I don't even remember.
Yeah, exactly. So ultimately, how do you guys feel about these movies? Just as a film experience, not even talking about the subject of Bigfoot, just the film itself.
Yeah, you go first, Rick. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I feel like they're stand on pretty much the same ground where they're pretty much just straight entertainment films. When it comes to the Bigfoot aspect, I feel like Willow Creek was a little bit more frightening, scary, and more intense, whereas Exist was super cheesy to me, but had a few great parts in it. To name some, like the part where the Bigfoot just leaps onto the RV, or he runs out of the smoke. There's a few great parts in it, but for me, Willow Creek just slightly edges it out better in quality in terms of the whole aura of Bigfoot, with like, them going into the town and asking questions about Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and then they have like the whole person trying to keep him out of the area for when they go camping. While Exist kind of just reminds me of like almost like a retread of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Bigfoot as like overall villain of the story, if you can call him a villain.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I would have to say I pretty much agree with Rick here. Is that uh, I watched Exists first, and I was I didn't know anything about Willow Creek. I was like, oh man, if this is like worse than Exists, we're in trouble here. I did enjoy Exists. I think it worked as what it was, but the interesting thing about it was that was directed by Eduardo Sanchez, who co-directed Blair Witch, but Willow Creek is literally Blair Witch but with Bigfoot. I mean, it's the same structure. They go to the town, they use a bunch of people who aren't actors, they're just like locals, and they tell them that they're doing a real documentary. And the fact that you never see Bigfoot, at least from what I caught, the fact that you never clearly see it in Willow Creek, was definitely Blair Witch vibes. Whereas Exists, they do hold off, but you get those two very noticeable scenes. One of them is the RV, and then the very very end, the film kind of gives you the money shot of the Bigfoot effect. So I thought Exists was like decently fun. It kind of gave you exactly what you expect from someone pitching you found footage Bigfoot. Willow Creek, though, I actually found myself really enjoying the characters and their dynamic. I liked that it was such a slow burn. It took about 35 minutes before they got to the forest, and then it was about an hour before about an hour until Bigfoot actually was full on attacking them, which made it a lot more unsettling to me. So I guess I would say like Willow Creek is my preferred of the two. I would watch it again. Exists, if I had a few drinks, perhaps. The Bigfoot aspect, I think Willow Creek captures more of the real world fear of Bigfoot. It's this kind of ominous thing that's out in the woods, always like watching you, but you never fully see it. And Exists was more the old lady who saw the bear standing in her backyard and is screaming about it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I thought that yeah, I echo those words exactly. I did surprisingly have fun with Exist, just probably because my standards going into it thinking it was just so low. So I was just surprised at the pure entertainment value that it had. And then one thing I will give Exist some points for versus Willow Creek, if we're talking realistic, depictions of Bigfoot, that kind of stuff, based on actual stories and accounts of things. Willow Creek is obviously the better movie for that. But I think sound design wise, that Exists was quite a bit better with when it comes to the noises that Bigfoot makes. Because Willow Creek, they just straight up had like lion and tiger sounds at some points. Mm-hmm. And whereas Exists, it had that, like, it's a kind of a dude, but then it's the whop sound, the famous like Bigfoot screech, the whop whop. The people go out, and if they're trying to attract a Bigfoot, they're gonna clap their hands and do the Bigfoot whop sound. And I think Exist really did their research on that, because he made those sounds, and beyond that, he made sounds that you would think someone who makes those sounds would make these other sounds, these just crazy chasing after you. If a Bigfoot type creature was real and was coming at you like this, just screaming at you, I think it would sound like that, according to our basis of knowledge of stories and legends and whatnot that we have so far. So I really got to give Exist some points for that.
The interesting thing to me about these two films is that, and I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it, partially what they were saying about the character of the respective Sasquatch, but also the kind of twist that both of them have. One of them has like an actual twist. The other was a more subtle twist, but I'm not sure if I quite understood. So to go into it, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts, because we all with exists, which I'm sorry, I don't like the title. It just kinda, it's hard to it's weird to say. I don't know why.
It almost adds to the cheese. It's like you're already
Exists.
making a cheesy, like just making a Bigfoot movie. I feel like is just cheesy within itself, and then you're adding the word exists.
Yeah, but in that one, the inciting incident is that there's these. I forget how old they are. They're like college kids or
College
whatever.
kids, yeah.
They're going out and they hit something that when they play back the footage is a Sasquatch. Now at the time we think that because they hit the Sasquatch that it's upset at them and that's why it's attacking them. The end of the film, and spoilers for both of the movies, of course. The end of the film reveals that no, when they hit that squatch, they actually killed it, and it's the parent of this child that is seeking revenge for their recklessness, and so thematically, it's kind of making a comment about how they, if they hadn't been so reckless going into nature and thinking that they could do what they wanted, they were safe, that nothing was gonna get them, they were wrong, and so the consequences of their actions. And then Willow Creek, again, I just watched it, so I'll have to get your guys' read on it. The missing woman is there at the end, and she's like naked, and she's clearly like around the because we hear 3 different calls, simultaneous calls from different Sasquatches. The missing woman was there. What were they trying to imply with that in your guys' mind?
I remember reading something that she became like a bride of Sasquatch or something like that. And I tried to find more information about that. I couldn't find anything about if there's like some kind of like historical significance to it or anything like that. All I could find was just fiction, books of fiction about Sasquatch Bride or Bigfoot's Bride.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing that that people talk as like a real event.
Yeah, so I actually know a thing or two about this, and I've known this. I grew up on the native reservation, so I heard plenty of Bigfoot stories growing up. So there's a couple of different options where you could go with it and theories. One is that it is quite common for Bigfoot stories for Sasquatches to kidnap people, whether that be for strictly breeding purposes or just to have extra people, extra hands to help them live, stuff like that. So there's that aspect of it where, Sasquatches are not humans, but they kind of are, so they can breed with people. The other side of it is that all Sasquatches are actually humans. They're just like wild men. And in that scenario, then yes, that is how they reproduce. They need to kidnap people, and that's how they continue living on with generations and whatnot. Because there's such few numbers, they die out. Eventually they'll just completely die out. So there's many stories when it comes to mainly children trying to be kidnapped by Sasquatches, particularly little girls and everything. There's many stories that I've heard where females are particularly targeted when they're in a Sasquatch environment, whether that's just hearing, they're the ones that just kind of, experience a little bit more as far as the people in the group hear things and whatnot. But then there's also accounts of, in particular, they're the ones who got little small rocks thrown at them. The Sasquatch is trying to get their attention. It's not just like the Sasquatch is messing with the people because they're people. The Sasquatch is like recognizing a female, a mate, a way to keep preserving life and all that. So I do very much believe that the Bride of Sasquatch is exactly what it is, pretty much.
Because Kelly is getting dragged away at the end. Very clearly, she's not killed.
Yep. So then it's literally like, so she's the next one. You know, she's going to now live this kind of pretty much terrible life of being a Sasquatch slave, pretty much. So very, very hardcore when you think about it. Very kind of gross and but very animalistic. Very just straight to the core. Just pure primal. That's what that is.
Yeah, well, I think again, as thank you for that insight, because I knew there was some stories about that, but I wasn't sure how significant. But yeah, the character is like and exists. It's kind of an avenging. It's an avenging force, justice, and then in Willow Creek, it's an animalistic preservation aspect. So very different. Different characterizations and not incompatible, you know, in the larger understanding of Sasquatch as a cultural thing.
Yeah, and I know I've heard all sorts of different stories of like, I mean, I wish I remembered as far as like names and dates and stuff like that goes. But I remember hearing this one story, and people who are really into Sasquatch stuff probably already know this one, of a kid who went missing for several days, and then they found him, and then he reported that like, yeah, it was this big hairy man picked me up and took me to this little like nest almost area, and then I just lived with these like 3 super hairy people for a little while, and then like I had an opportunity and I ran away. And like that's the story that they have, and it's just a child just talking and stuff, you know. And I've heard things about like maybe some adults experiencing these sort of things, but yeah. So it's just, it seems to be like, if you're gonna like count off Bigfoot traits and stuff like that, their motto, what they do, all that kind of stuff, it seems to be that kidnapping is actually quite common.
Yeah, which makes sense why it's tied so closely with ufology and stuff. The abduction aspect, people having these sorts of experiences, these half remembered traumatic things, or in the case of the Sasquatch stuff, just it was kind of, I don't know how to explain it. I was just there and then I left when I could.
Yep.
You know. So I would put it to you both. What do you feel is the plausibility of Sasquatch's, I guess from the standpoint of historical existence, yay or nay, and then the possibility that they could still exist in our modern technological environment where we can have drones and trail cams and stuff that would catch certain things.
My opinion is, I have the same opinion for both. I believe Sasquatch is almost these wild men and these hermits that have gone to live out on the land. And the reason why they're so hairy is because they're not getting haircuts. They're also using furs for protection on the land. They're unkempt. They're able to, you know, camouflage themselves in, you know, the forest. And everybody that's seen them have reported them being really stinky and very strong, which are traits that you're gonna have living out on the land on your own. But them being supernatural, where like I've read some ideas about them being, you know, almost skinwalkers, where they can transform into like trees and stones and stuff to stay hidden. I think it's very unlikely. Because, you know, some of that stuff we haven't, or most of that stuff we haven't found to be true in our, you know, in our lives. Them being maybe an ancestor to like humans like the missing link, maybe. Probably, maybe there might be something there, but I think we would have saw something or got fur, some DNA, and been able to, decipher that. But, you know, there's always the but that makes you think, okay, there might be that one idea that might change my mind if I see something or hear something, or, if I'm out on the field ever in, the forest and I see something or hear something, it might change my idea. But my opinion stands that, I think they're hermits and wild men that just live out in the wilderness and that have always lived out in the wilderness, that have never come out to our society. But I'm willing to be, proved wrong in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the wild man aspect is definitely probably the one with the most merit to it. Especially kind of going back to my upbringing with stories that I've heard and whatnot. One of those stories being from some certain native members that my family knew growing up. Is that there used to be a thing, this isn't like all native tribes and everything, but it has been a thing in the past of the medicine men that are a part of a tribe. In order to become a medicine man, they leave the tribe and go live out on their own for a long time, for potentially the rest of their lives, if not just like a 10-year span, 20-year span, something large. And so while they're doing that, they leave with nothing. They live off the land with absolutely no tools or anything, and they, over time, they get hairy, and they learn to just everything about Earth and what it has to offer. And they learn the ways of medicine via Mother Nature. And through the years, the tribes then visit these medicine men when they have some sort of need of a doctor, of sorts. And that medicine man, through what he's learned, going on his little like spirit journey out in the wilderness all by himself for a substantially long time, then has learned these things where he's able to live out there and be able to combat disease and other things through things that they've learned from the earth. And now, like, one of those things, as far as like people don't really think about, is like when you get hairy, all that kind of stuff. You go out there and you get hairy. For one thing, with like, if you've ever heard of wild hogs and pigs, it takes literally 2 weeks for just a normal pig in a domestic environment, if they're thrown into the wilderness where they no longer feel safe, they immediately start growing their tusks out like a hog, and they start getting hairy. What you picture of like what a wild hog looks like and what just a normal pig looks like, the only actual difference of that is domestication. And just any normal pig, obviously there's differences with breeds, but any normal pig that you just see, a little cute piglet, can turn into big scary wild hog in like just a matter of like a month. It's actually quite fascinating. So, I mean, obviously there's differences between us and pigs, but to a certain degree, I think it makes sense that we could get more wild and turn into that in a matter of years, for sure. Because if you're just out there with no clothes and everything, I think, yeah, it makes sense if your body is just like, well, I need hair. So,
well, I think that as we're discussing, that seems to be the most likely, because they even mentioned this in Willow Creek. This idea of, well, we discover all new species all the time, and she's like, yeah, but we haven't. Kelly says to him, we haven't discovered anything close to the Sasquatch, and we probably would have by this point. But if they are human or close enough, if we found DNA or found excrement or bones we wouldn't think it was anything unusual, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would find it like buried or something, or we would find it in the wilderness, and
Yeah.
that that's found all the time. So we wouldn't have anything that would indicate to us that this is the what we're looking for.
There was one like statistic that I heard. Now, of course, this is me reciting from memory, so numbers could be wrong. But apparently, it is very rare for them to find for people to find bones of like grizzly bears, specifically grizzly bears versus other bears. Um, and it's like, well, we know that grizzly bears exist because we see them all the time, obviously. But according to, if we were just basing our research only off of bones and what we find, grizzly bears would be a crazy anomaly because just as far as what we find, they're naturally in the wild when they die off. You know, however grizzlies averagely die, I don't know. For whatever reason, they're one of the way more rare finds when it comes to archaeology type stuff and just bones and stuff like that. So there's all sorts of different pockets in the world and parts of the forest that are just as unexplored as parts of the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I think too, is if we're discussing the fact that this would be an intelligent species, it doesn't take a lot of intelligence to have kind of an awareness of your body being found. As we know, cats will leave and go as far away as possible when they're about to pass, because they don't, presumably because they don't want to have their owners, clanmates, whatever, see them, be around them. So if cats can do that, theoretically.
Do you think it's like a DNA instinct? This is coming from someone who doesn't know jack shit. DNA instinct to do that, to like, they don't want other predators to come and be attracted to their remains in their body because obviously they're scavengers and whatnot. I've never heard of that, but it makes sense to me. I don't know if you guys have heard of that being a thing.
I could see it being a thing.
Yeah.
And another thing that kind of tickles my mind when you were explaining what that grizzly bears they never find their bones, Could it be something like grizzly bears might be cannibalistic when, they die, so they might eat their stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Could that be something, a trait that, Sasquatch has? Because, Wendigos are, that some people claim are the same as Sasquatch, and Wendigos in some cultures are from people turn into, or humans that turn into Wendigos when they consume human flesh, So could that be an aspect of Bigfoot? I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because like there's so many times that in depictions of Bigfoot that he's cannibalistic. So crossbreeding the Wendigo and the Bigfoot, and then also the Skinwalker thing, it just kind of all melds together a little bit.
Here's if we want to go down a certain rabbit hole. So there's a lot of theories about how Homo sapiens became the dominant of the humanoids. Some people think that we just we literally bred out the Cro-Magnons, we bred out the Neanderthals, or we killed them all. Is it possible, right, that maybe if this is some sort of missing link situation, that the instinct is that because there was the kind of consciousness, the revolution of sapience, is it possible that because of this missing link's encounters with Homo sapiens, who were clever enough to utilize certain strategic things or trickery or certain things, that the instinct to hide your dead, to keep your pockets of population small, or you'll be found and killed because you're too close Yeah, almost like, it's like the uncanny valley. When we find something that is like almost human but not quite, it's actually weirder to us than something like a dog or a cat or a horse. It's the fact that it's closer to us. So perhaps in some way they have an instinct that if they are discovered, that we're just gonna swarm in and like be kind of drawn to like investigate. And so that's why it's like ingrained in them that they have to stay small and stay hidden, and that's why they don't. And also, given their size, they would not be able to maintain a large population in terms of food in the ecosystem. That's just some ideas, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's actually, yeah, that's really interesting that like maybe perhaps once upon a time we hunted them nearly to extinction. And so it's like a dystopian future young adult novel.
Yeah.
My love triangle with Bigfoot and a Wendigo. Uh, so yeah, no, I that's an interesting theory. I've never really thought about that one.
Yeah. What else is pretty interesting is different pockets of the world and even the U.S. They have these different accounts of hairy men, huge hairy men that are in the forest. You have the Yetis over in Asia. You have, I think it was like the Cleveland Monster or something in Ohio, and then you have another one in Missouri. I can't remember the exact name. And then you have the Skinwalkers in the Southwest. Um, and then Canada has like a whole bunch of sightings. I think there's like one actual like specific town in Canada that they have Sasquatch as like their um, emblazoned on their flag, and there's a big tourist center in that area where they supposedly have like I think it was like 300 sightings over the last like 100 years or something like that. With Sasquatch. Don't quote me on those numbers either, but they use like Sasquatch as like their big kind of tourist attraction. But it's just interesting that at one point, probably in the 1800s or so, some of these sightings came around and we didn't really have much communication there to say, hey, person in Northwest, talk about Sasquatch. Well, I'm here in Missouri, doing my thing, and there's Sasquatch over here. Maybe we can start, passing on this legend. But that's really odd that, something like that has, grown in attention for so long and we still don't know anything about it.
Yeah, no. The fact that you can have so many isolated communities and super far apart countries across the world, and yet they all end up with these legends about very similar creatures. Like,
But distinct.
yeah.
It's not as if they're a carbon copy. There are distinctions. And I have two thoughts on this. If you want to view it as cultural, something that really fascinates me is this recurring thing in mythology about the this is a quick tangent. This recurring thing in mythology of the sky god versus the sea serpent, and like all these different cultures around the same time all gained this creation kind of myth. And I'm always fascinated by like, so how did this occur in unique varieties, unless it was like at the start of our civilization and then it branched out. So the fact that this is a similar case, is very interesting to me. Yeah.
But we all have our own version of wild hairy men that just leave, so it could be something culturally that we've all had people that have been exiled from our culture, and then later on we're like, oh, there's a big wild hairy man out there now.
Yeah.
That's capturing our young or killing us, or out in the woods, scaring us away with all these like sounds. Speaking of the sounds, when I went into like to hear like some of the sounds that Bigfoot sounds, a lot of them are pretty like humanistic in sound, plus to add in like some of them do sound like animals and humans, like kind of like a crossbreed, but that's something humans can learn how to mimic out there. So I don't know, there's just a lot of cool things that make sense but then don't make sense.
Yeah. No, yeah, the connection of each culture has their hairy man and each culture has their own sky daddy. It's
Yeah,
it's got to mean something, right?
yeah,
I think psychologically, human beings always have this sense of, like you were saying, if a pig in a month can become essentially a different species, mankind, when pressed or put into very extreme living situations, adapts to it. And so potentially, if we're looking at it from a psychological point of view, is why these legends, the exile narrative of our society, or our species even, is that it's almost like Bigfoot, Sasquatch embodies the primal elemental kind of symbol of the man in tune with nature. It's like this denied thing of our past at one point when we civilized, we got agriculture, we weren't nomads anymore, and maybe that's what it represents, and that's why it's always kind of present. Like, even though there's nowadays we're enlightened and we just, a lot of us dismiss this idea, it's not going away. Perhaps that is why.
Yeah, regardless on what you want to push on the idea yourself and you want to rationalize things, it's not going away. It's still there. You said the word primal, and I realized there was a different film named, I think it was actually called Primal. And it was another Bigfoot movie, very Bigfoot slasher-esque movie. But in this one, Bigfoot actually wore like wood armor. Like he had like a wood mask and stuff, very like Jason Voorhees-esque.
Like that.
He had like tools and knives, and he had like a bow and arrow and stuff, and that aspect of it was pretty cool. Their Bigfoot costume was definitely pretty cool. The movie was pretty terrible though, but yeah, it was. And it was another one where he kidnaps the woman and then does certain things to her, which aren't very nice. But it's along that theme again.
I want to go back to Willow Creek real quick. I think something that really was, in a way, profound to me is it wasn't just that it wasn't that they copied Blair Witch, it's that they understood why Blair Witch was effective. So to tie it into some earlier stuff you were saying about the wild man, is since we don't see it, we don't know to what degree these things we're hearing are just wild men. Because again, they're taking these brides, but they could just be like humans, right? Like we see throughout the beginning of the film, there's all these cultural depictions, like these commercialized tourist versions of Bigfoot, and the film's kind of saying, look at how we're commodifying this terrifying natural thing. So the film is, putting in your mind the fact that there's this big hairy ape in the woods, but since we never see them, the film kind of leaves it open to the fact that perhaps, as we posited earlier, that they are just wild men, and taking Kelly and taking the missing woman was just something they've been doing time immemorial. They've just existed, and they're not apes or anything.
They exist.
They exist.
No,
Yeah.
that's actually a really good point, because like if you think about it, you're alone in the woods, you're hearing creepy sounds, and then you get a rock thrown at you. You turn around, there's spooky, big, scary, hairy man in front of you, charging at you. Terrifying, right? How about just big, spooky, scary man? He's not even hairy, charging at you. That's like just as terrifying. So it doesn't even have to be the whole persona of Bigfoot, big hairy ape-like man. It can just be a dude in the woods, and that is just as scary.
Because your mind will fill in the blanks of what you don't see, especially in the dark.
Yeah, and we all know all too well just how far humans themselves are willing to go. So I don't think anything Bigfoot's going to do to you is anything scarier than what a normal man might do to you. So, yeah.
Hell no.
Exactly. But, Yeah, Josiah, you were talking about a little bit of an actual history facts involving Willow Creek and the origins and why they went to that particular area. Most
So
people
the
already know this, but let's get into that.
the the I think the cool thing about in the world of cryptozoology and these supernatural things, the interesting thing to me about Bigfoot is it's not just the Sasquatch aspect. It's that the Paterson Gimlin film itself it has its own like separate branch off lore of people trying to prove it is fake, prove that it is real. The fact that these guys went out there to film like a pseudo documentary and then they happened to find it, but then at the same time, yes, that seems suspicious, but who's gonna have footage of something unless they were specifically looking for it with camera equipment? You know, so I don't think that necessarily is automatically like it's circumstantial, yes. But I actually went into a deep dive a while ago, just researching the Paterson Gimlin film because I think it's an important part of not just the history of the cultural history of the area and then the cryptozoology factor, but also of like film in general. Like that was one of the earliest, arguably like found footage films. Like if you want to say it's fake, right? It's one of the earliest found footage horror films. It might be the first, but because Cannibal Holocaust was what in the 70s or something.
Something like that, yeah.
And the fact is that the reason that I tend to think like maybe it's real is they went out there with like all this stuff to make like a fake documentary, but the fact that the footage that they took was so they could have maybe they were smart enough, maybe they're really good con men and they're really smart enough to know like how to present it, but the fact that it wasn't, there's certain ways you can do something where people will try to show you something real, but based on like the the presentation, it's like, well, that was a little too orchestrated, like it was too clean. The fact that when people try to HD remaster the footage, because I know Rick, you were looking at it earlier, I read this convincing article that was saying like breaking down like the ways the film has been restored and saying that the restoration process kind of adds phantom details or takes away details that might convince you that it's not a suit. So it's there's like again there's this thing I recommend anyone interested in this topic to go check out. There's a whole website, there's like 10 PDFs. It's called the Munns Report, and he breaks down like, okay, technologically what was like Hollywood capable of doing with all their resources at this time to make this sort of a suit, and these guys had nowhere near that amount of resources at their disposal. He breaks down that. He breaks down like analyzing like, okay, is this like fabric? Is this muscle movement? And so the interesting thing about the Munns Report is that the conclusion is that the being that they saw was a Sasquatch. It was female because if you watch it, there's like breasts, which again, if you're trying to fake it, like
thick.
that's such an she thick. In my opinion, like if you're trying to fake this, why would you put the detail of the breast? It seems like you're just making your job harder to if you were adding that. Just to me, I don't know why. To me, that's the detail that also makes me question it. But the conclusion that the Munns Report comes to is that a lot of the weird coloration and certain aspects of the physical form is because this is an old, elderly creature with like fat deposits and like scars, and she's so old that she's at the end of her life, and she's moving slowly because she's just kind of she's elderly in essence, maybe possibly even like dealing with some chronic pain, which was interesting to me. There's a whole lot to go into about the PGF and have people done enough to replicate the walk cycle? Can you zoom in on the footage and determine certain things?
Yeah.
So I think not just like the Sasquatch debate, but just the debate around that film is so fascinating to me, which is why I was glad Willow Creek was so focused on them going to the exact site. Like I believe in that tent scene, which is like 18 minutes long.
Yeah, it's so long. That was honestly so impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were in like the spot where they camped before they shot the PGF, so it's like so I would say like I'm obviously not an expert, but the Munns report does definitely give like the best argument I've seen for the validity of that film being real and not a hoax. Which again, there's internal debate. Like the PGF doesn't completely discount the rest of the sightings, right? It's just the most famous one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm pulling it up to watch it right now. Give me one second.
Because to me the weird thing about it is like it was in 67, right, Rick?
Yeah.
It was in 67, and every video I've seen, barring like maybe one, besides the PGF, none of them look as real as that one does. So like, wouldn't you think we would get better at replicating, like, making the effects look good? Or maybe you could argue it was the camera equipment. Our cameras are better, so it's harder to make it look real. I don't know.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid seeing some random History Channel documentary, and they had a guy like recreate the walk, saying that he was the one that was in the costume and stuff. And his walk was like spot on. But yeah, no, I never actually noticed the what looks like breasts. Yeah, I can see that looking at this right now. And yeah, why would that be an addition that they made to this costume? Like, if you're gonna be like, we're making a costume to fake a Bigfoot thing, and so we can get famous, blah blah blah, why add breasts? Why is that the move? Like, I think generally speaking, nobody thinks about that unless they're just so ahead of the game as far as what they were doing. That is
point. Everybody always fakes like the male version of the animal,
It's just easier. I mean, you would just cover the pecs with hair.
Yeah,
and they'd be like, oh well, easy, So I didn't notice that until this last year, when I went back to it, and I was just like was watching it and like analyzing it and going like, okay, so like, do I think this is real? Do I think this is fake? And again, I'm not making any like definitive statements. I don't think we'll ever know unless we find additional evidence as far as the Paterson Gimlin film goes. But I do think it is the clearest like visual evidence that we have found in relation to this subject. So
yeah, it regardless on whether it's real or not, it looks like way better than what pretty much every other Bigfoot hoax footage that you can think of. And the fact that it's like so old is like quite substantial, honestly. So
and then we have the recent one that that just popped up. I think it was in Colorado. That became a hoax.
What
was a train passing by, and there's
I heard it. Wasn't it like the sheriff or something, or maybe the sheriff just knew who it was? Somebody that they like did that regularly just to try to freak people out. They just did it for fun, which is pretty funny. But
the secret clown cult that was scaring people back in what was it, 2014 or something, 2016?
Yeah.
One thing that's like honestly kind of a curious thought to have about anything Sasquatch and whatnot, let's say, on the verge of extinction, blah blah blah. What if by now Bigfoot is extinct, Yeah. What if there was a couple left back when, like, maybe the 80s or whatever, a couple of left when, for the big famous stories throughout the, the last 50 years or whatever. And, but now, like, maybe they're all gone by now, and those were the last legs potentially. Just a small little theory.
To me, that's sort of what I think is the most realistic explanation. I think so going off the PGF, because there was a point where I was like, I think the PGF is real. However, I think this is maybe like they died off a few years after this. That's when like it really started heating up and everyone was going out to look for stuff. And what if it was coincidentally around the time when the last of them were so old or were so old they got hunted and eaten or by like bears or something or other predators, or it's possible that right when we were at the advent of getting wider release video technology is when they were dying out. And so that's why now that we have trail cams and drones and all these things, now they are gone. You know, it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
like the dodo went extinct in what, the 20s or something, or the 1880s or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
And
you know.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as with what we were kind of talking about earlier, the aspect of Sasquatch having a cannibalistic nature to them. Who's to say they didn't mostly kill off each other?
True.
You know,
chimps can go to war, so.
So.
I could totally see that happening.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's just it's one of those things. So then,
I never thought about that going extinct. I never had that like thought cross my mind, but that's actually something that could happen. We're down to I think like 2 white rhinos left. So what? And we're keeping close eye on those. And what makes it think of something that we never really had a close eye on? Maybe there's like a handful of them and they went extinct in the 70s. Yeah,
and that's one of those things that like it goes side by side with what is extinct and then what's newly discovered. It's like there's so many times that it's like, oh, we thought this thing was extinct. I guess it's not because we found some over here. And so it's just like it's this constant little battle of the two, of extinct or newly discovered, and it's like lots of times those kind of blend together, I feel like.
Yeah. Because they might have migrated to a new whole area away from, where we think they usually are.
Or then there's...
You just think like, I mean, really, we can't keep an eye on every square inch of Canada.
Yeah.
Think of how much of Canada is actually populated given the square footage. It's like, it's a whole continent, essentially.
Yeah.
Especially the Yukon, I think they call it. Where it's very, like, sparsely, populated throughout.
Yeah. And, one thing to also think about as well is when it comes to Bigfoot sightings, blah, blah, blah. It's always, covered in hair and whatnot. When you're not getting a good close look and you're just seeing something pass by, mud and hair look very similar. So it could be hair and mud, kind of coming back to a little bit of the wild man thing. Seeing something really quick or whatnot, it's not always necessarily going to be exactly what you think it is. And something like that, it makes sense to be muddy. I've heard all sorts of theories of they cover themselves in mud to mask their scent and blah, 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 different reasons. But it's just...
Predator.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So you never know exactly what it is. The thing to always keep in mind is no matter what your theory is, it is never 100% correct. Ever. So I think that in life, people should not be so darn tootin' about their belief of it's exactly this way. It might be very similar, but it's never 100%. So I just think it's good to keep an open mind with these things, that you never know if it's quite the extreme that it might be that's super paranormal, or it's more simple than you think it is, or maybe, you know, it is pretty out there and it's something that we have a hard time comprehending as humans in this modern day. So it's just gotta keep an open mind. Could be fake, could be real, could be something in between, could be something part of a fictitious dark. And that's another thing, as far as like kind of the theme of what we're doing with this channel is exploring that line. You know, there's the thing of what actually inspired the story, what people think of a particular time of when they saw this thing, or what it originally was way back when, and then what the stories turned into.
Yeah.
That game of telephone, that is humanity. Humanity is one giant game of telephone. So it's like, was it a different species? Was it just something that wasn't even real to begin with, and for some reason it just got real out of hand of somebody telling some story, or, you know, what?
No, I was gonna make the joke earlier, but it's like, you know, Amish communities. I mean, they're very isolated from us. You know, living out in the general population. So to consider the medicine man aspect of, perhaps there were some who did find a way to get by and created a community, and it just takes, you know, a few scary encounters, you know, and then it's perpetuated into this larger mythos.
Yeah,
as things are connected, we like to connect things too.
Yeah, because there's so many accounts of somebody experiencing something that was just so unexplainable and so out of the norm and weird, that I believe that there are these circumstances where something that we just don't understand in each category. You know, you got ghosts, you got you know, sea monsters, forest creatures, all sorts of cryptids, you know. So do the Amish have any cryptids? That's the question.
I'm sure, but they don't post it online because they don't have internet.
It's true. We
You have to go talk to them.
Gotta find whatever news press paper they got going on over there.
Imagine
Or we should
rolling
just
up
go
to an
over and
Amish
talk to 'em.
community. Yeah.
Yeah. One thought I also had as well is when we were talking about different cultures with their own version of Bigfoot or whatever. One thing that's pretty popular, especially like way back when, werewolves, wolfmen. That's very similar to Sasquatch. It's just like, do they stand up, or do they are they on all fours? That's pretty much the big distinctive question when it comes to stuff like that. And then where do you get with werewolves? Then we circle back all the way to skinwalkers. So yeah.
It all leads back to skinwalkers.
The idea of them, like, you know, people wearing furs to survive out in the.
Yep. I know I've heard stories of just, you know, people coming into these unknown areas where people are practicing certain things that they say, oh, they're skinwalkers and whatnot. And people are doing really weird stuff, not necessarily paranormal, but like they're running around on all fours. They think in their own head that they're a dog, whether that is like drugs, depending on the type of drugs. I know I've heard some crazy stories with something called meth, but then there's all these other stories out there. So it's just somebody who is really truly believing whatever that thing is and what extent they're going to go to. It's not out of the realm that it's not even a wild man. It's just a dude that went on a bender for a weekend and was kind of losing his shit and was like, I'm gonna dress up as Bigfoot, not even like as a costume, like he's gonna literally go out, cover himself in mud and do some really weird shit like out in the woods, and then somebody saw it. So
that to me like reminds me of the Native Americans and other cultures, the shamanistic thing. You know, you channel the spirit of this non-human thing, and you become it. You take on its aspects, and you fully believe that you are getting some sort of power or energy from it. So
Yeah, and the thing that's funny with that is that's another thing that connects across cultures. Vikings, Nordic, that's like is very much a berserker thing, and so many different aspects with that, with the all the different Norse mythology and whatnot of channeling the wolf, channeling the bear. You know, it's like almost every culture just has a certain aspect of everything. Yeah.
Well, do you guys have like any like stories of people that you know that have like any accounts of meeting Sasquatch or coming near Sasquatch or, you know, being around anything like that?
you know, no, but it's to me, it's just it's more that people, you know, people I know that, and it's been more ghosts and spirits. But I feel like
Hmm.
that's more common in general. I feel like people who live in houses and apartments, you have this bigger sense of something was there before you, and so you see spirits. But as for Sasquatch, I don't think, unless I'm forgetting completely, I don't think I've ever had someone say that they've encountered that sort of thing in the wild or around where they lived.
Hmm.
What about you, Brandon?
Um, well, I've experienced some things,
Yeah.
but you know, it's from my experiences that I've had. It's never been concrete. You know, it's never been that was a Sasquatch. You know, it's just been freaky. Things that could have just been some regular dude because ultimately I didn't see anything. But the circumstances surrounding it is what make you question it. I know, like that just depends if I should get into these stories or not. That's I don't know.
Go ahead and
Should
tell one of them.
one of them? Okay. Well, so growing up, I always was told, and this is the other factor that comes into play with these sorts of things, is you don't talk about it because if you talk about it, then things happen. That is like almost protocol when it comes to everything for the natives. With like the most common, probably popular thing when it comes to that kind of theology is the Wendigo. They call it the W word because you're not supposed to say the Wendigo because that is bad word. You'll summon that spirit. Don't say that word. So lots of people call it the W word. And so same thing when it comes to Bigfoot and Sasquatch. I used to be in the Boy Scouts, and I went on a 50-mile hike in the Olympic Mountains when I was like 16, 17, something like that. And this one night, me and my friends that our little clique of in our Boy Scout troop, we decided we're gonna sleep under the stars tonight. So we put a tarp on the ground and we all just laid down. We came to for that night. We had this little meadow area, very circular tree line all surrounding us and everything, and then one little path that of how we got in there that night. And so then we all lay down and we're just talking, you know, super clear night, very pretty, all the stars and everything. And so then, funny enough, the pussy of the group, he was like, "Hey, we should tell scary stories," and we're all like, "Okay, yeah, whatever," and stuff. And it's kind of funny. It's like I was immediately thinking of like, of course, you would be the one to say that, even though you don't want to do it. And so then people were like, "Yeah, yeah, let's tell scary stories and stuff," and like everyone's just like, "Who knows a scary story?" And then I was like, kind of thinking, and I immediately thought of a Bigfoot thing that happened with my older siblings when I was a small child. It's not really my place to really tell that story, but as a teenager, I told it. And so I was like, well, I kind of have a scary story, like a Bigfoot story. I don't know if you guys want to hear that. And so then my friends were like, yeah, let's do the Bigfoot story. Yeah, perfect. And so then, I tell them this story. And, it wasn't a crazy story or anything, but for me as a child, when that did happen, I was pretty freaked out. But so I tell this story and stuff, and then immediately after, the very friend that suggested we tell a scary story is like, well, I'm actually kind of scared now. He's like, I don't, we shouldn't do that. We should stop talking about that and stuff. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm kind of really scared and everything. And so then we're talking stuff, and I immediately, I was like, it's okay, don't worry, we'll stop talking about it completely. And I reiterate to them about what I was always told growing up of, don't talk about it. If you talk about it, weird things happen. So just don't talk about it. You don't invite that sort of juju, and everything will be okay. And so I'm in the middle of telling them this, of like, it's okay, like, you just don't talk about it, explaining that, how that works and stuff. And they're like, okay, yeah. And then right as I'm in the middle of saying this, we hear what sounds like a giant branch being like snapped in half from across the way over in the woods. And so we all like shot up and we're like, what the fuck is that? Like, we don't know, like, it literally, like, the way I can visualize it of what it sounded like is it had to be a branch that was like that thick, and someone just like going up to it, like it's on the side of the tree, someone going up to it and like ripping it down, just breaking it off. That's what it sounded like, I mean, who knows what it was, but the timing was just like, oh my God. And then so we shoot up and we're like, oh, stuff, and then we're just gonna go to bed, stop talking completely. And so we all just lay there, in our little sleeping bags, just not talking. And then we're like laying there for like a good little bit, like probably at least 20 minutes or so. A whole tree falls down in the tree line. Like, we just hear and just like a whole thing just goes crashing down, and we're like, what's happening? And it just like, it was so freaky in that moment. And obviously it's not something that you could say was that for certain, but it was just like, man, the timing of it. And so we're all just like, we just feel like there's like almost like we're being watched from the tree line, and of course that could just simply be paranoia at this point, but it sure did feel like that, and so we just like, we stayed quiet for the rest of the night and eventually fell asleep. So when we woke up in the morning, we were telling our Boy Scout leaders and everything, and nobody's believing us like at all. And we're like, but this did happen. Like, we're not making this up. And like, there was like, yeah. And so then, we pack up and we go leave. And, this was like a little detour of this little area of like the main trail. So we had to go out and back to the same path that we came down from. And that tree that fell was covering that path. And it was uprooted. And it was just this big tree. And we're just like, what does this mean? Like, what it felt like in that moment was like you're in my territory, knock this down on your little man-made path, like, get the hell out, type feeling. And, at that point, nobody else in our troop was hearing us out, like, at all. So we're all just, like, looking at each other like, what's up with that tree, man? What does this mean? And that was that. But yeah, so it's not like, can't say it was Sasquatch, but it's kind of weird that it happened as we were talking about Sasquatch.
It's like, I think we've all had those experiences where we've been out in the wild or something and we've heard, or we've woken up to like go, take a piss or something, and then we hear something like around the tent. And it's like it's probably just like a raccoon or like a deer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You just hear it around there, but you're always just kind of like, well, I don't know what it is, and if I open the flap, I won't be able to see it, most likely, or it'll just leave by the time it thinks I'm coming towards it. But that your version, I mean, yeah, the tree collapsing. I mean, the branch you could like, but the tree collapsing, that's pretty insane.
Yeah, and like the thing is on top of it, this tree wasn't rotten, I have no idea as far as if this tree was the same tree that we heard the initial snap from. But that initial snap sounded very fresh. It didn't sound like it was just a rotten branch that started falling down. It was a clean snap. It just sounded not rotten. There's that certain, if you spend much time in the woods, the difference between rotting wood and not rotting wood. And you can tell by the sound. And both those sounds were not rotting wood. So I just do not believe that it just happened to fall down on its own. I don't believe that snap just happened to happen on its own. Could have been a bear, could have been something else. Bears mess with trees all the time. On that same trip, we did have a encounter with a black bear. It was in our path in front of us, and it was digging through, I think it might have actually been a rotted tree that it was digging through. It kind of looked like what you would picture a bear digging through a tree trying to get to like a bee's nest or something like that. But that was directly in the trail in front of us, so we had to yell at the bear and get it to buzz off. A thing with black bears is you just have to make yourself bigger than them, make a lot of noise, and they kind of just like get annoyed of you and run away. And that's exactly what happened. He just like, he came, he stuck his head out, he looked at us, and he was like, he just looked very annoyed by us, and he ran away. He didn't necessarily look threatened by us. He just didn't care. He was just like, whatever. And he ran away. So bears were around. Very possible that this scenario of what happened that one night could have been a bear. I'm definitely not saying it wasn't. Just very interesting timing of that happening. We're just talking about Sasquatch, and then a thing happens. Pretty crazy if that was a bear. But very well could have been. Just funny timing.
Do you feel that in your own personal, ooh-ha, that it was Sasquatch?
I feel like it had to be something. Something more than just a random coincidence. Because, like, come on. I was just talking and calming my friends down after I told them a Sasquatch story, calming them down saying, it's okay if we just don't talk about it, then nothing will happen. And explaining to them about the very idea that when you talk about something, you invite that thing, and then weird stuff happens. And what is it that happened? Weird things happened in that very single moment. So it's got to be something. I don't know what. I'm not going to 100% say anything, but I do feel like there was something more than just some random by chance thing.
Yeah, plus you can't say that, it was dark, our minds played a trick on us, because you guys woke up the next morning.
Yeah.
And what happened to be on the ground?
Yeah.
Giant ass tree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Brandon, you mentioned off podcast the fact that what if, this whole concept of like maybe a lot of this cryptid supernatural stuff is whatever you want to, I'll use this term, it might have a function behind it that is more logical, but a poltergeist, like your mind making something real, like your mind is dwelling on something and then it manifests it in a strange way, or the essence of something, right?
Yes, exactly. So, and that's actually a subject that I was wanting to tackle. Potentially our next podcast episode, we can get into such particular words like poltergeist and how that might weave the line between ghosts, but even also cryptid things as well. So I think that that is a pretty good segue into what our next episode might be. Maybe.
Ooh.
Well, unless we bump into Sasquatch in the next few days or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to record an episode from the woods, and
That'd be pretty baller.
while we're being dragged around naked by Sasquatch.
Oh, perfect. I've always wanted to be a bride.
I'll just have my little GoPro and be like, "You'll never guess what, guys."
He's over there.
Stream from TikTok.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
I'll do
Look what's real.
TikTok dances with Sasquatch.
Bigfoot
Hell
hair.
yeah.
Yum, yum.
And I'll make sure to get that that popular TikTok sound of just Raise the Colors song where it's the yo ho. and then yes, me and Bigfoot will NPC stream and yum. It'll be an experience, and it'll be live
You guys
from
can
the
definitely have
fictitious
a
dark.
work off.
If we're going off that OG footage of what was it called, the Paterson Gimlin film, I think I have a run for my money with how thick that Sasquatch was. I don't think I can compete.
Oh yeah, it's just insane. Like the level, it's so dense. Every single image.
Yeah, you talk about an ass quake.
The clapping.
Yeah, you wonder what a Bigfoot's print of a foot looks like. Don't get me started on the next thing.
Oh man, that's crazy. All right, gentlemen. I think we've come to the end of our first journey into the fictitious dark.
I think so. Alrighty.
Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on this wild journey with
Always.
Sasquatch and twerking. Alrighty. Well, gentlemen, until next time, we can call it here. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And